So this is a collaborative effort between Info and Hivesoft. Currently 2 companies, hope to be 1 relatively soon. We've agreed a merger. It's still pending SEC and shareholder approval, but soon enough hopefully. We're going to talk about China, social localization and crowdsourcing. We have about 25 minutes by now, and we're going to cover the world's largest country, the world's second largest economy, crowdsourcing, localization, a couple of services and so forth, so I think we better get started. Most of you are probably familiar with the content of the graphic to the right here, with the US being the world's largest economy. At the start of the millennium, the current millennium, China was number 6. By now it's number 2, and the experts all say that China probably will overtake the US in about 10 years or so in terms of size of the economy. China will be the world's 2nd largest consumer market by 2015. That's largely driven by the growing middle class. There are about 61 Chinese companies listed in the global Fortune 500. Worth noting perhaps is that a lot of Westerners actually have difficulties naming even a handful of those companies or Chinese brands. So maybe an experiment, how many of you actually know Chinese brands?
Huawei,
That's one.
CTE, ZTE, Xiaomi. I don't know how to pronounce some of these.
Sounds like an expert.
But I swear I'm not making it up.
That's 4. Yeah, that's already pretty good. But still, there are like 50 to go or so at least. And I think that the background to that is probably that the Chinese didn't really figure out branding and marketing yet. And that's probably, we should probably be happy about that, because when they do, we're in for some fierce competition. Another perception in the West of China is that they just copy what we do and bring out their own copies, basically, of our products and brands. Which might be true to a certain extent, but fact is that China actually surpassed the US and Japan as the country filing most patents in 2011. So they've addressed that and tried to climb up the value chain. So internet use in China, as you can see on the right, there are more than 500 million internet users, which means that the Chinese are also the largest population on the internet. It's growing, 700 million in 2015. And as you can see, it grows more quickly than in the US. So India has high growth rate as well, but from a lower level. So more than 1 in 5 internet users are Chinese now. Probably by now there are 200 million online shoppers in China. And in 3 to 4 years, 10% of retail sales in China will be online. And this is all also connected to the growing middle class in China. Another stat, 18.7 hours would be the average time spent online in China, which is comparable to the US, where it's about 19.5 hours a week, so the usage pattern is similar. You can also see that the internet is by far the most important media channel. Actually, the internet, in terms of use, is more important than TV, newspapers, and radio combined. An important concept in China would be guanxi. Excuse me, Tony, if I'm killing the pronunciation here. Thank you. Which is a concept of networking and the power of relationships in China. So business transactions are generally a lot driven by relationships in China, which goes to show why social networking is so important and popular in China. But it's of course also important to note that the players are completely different than in the West. So they've got their sort of equivalent of Twitter with 300 million users. They've got their Facebook with about 150 million registered users. And there's a social media hub with around 500 million users. I'm not entirely sure about that number. It's from Tencent, and considering that there are 500 million users in total in China of the internet, I'm not sure that 500 million figure is completely accurate, but it's popular, to say the least. Let's look at our industry here. According to the Translators Association of China, there are more than 12,000 providers in China, which can be compared to the number that Common Sense Advisory has estimated of 26 million in total globally. That's, of course, they might use different ways of calculating that, but it's still a good indication of how important the translation and localization industry is in China. There are at least 1 million people in translation services, and those translation professionals saw their income grow by 46% in 2010. So even with a high wage inflation in China, this is a pretty significant increase in income. About 13% of the global translation market revenue is in Asia, and the big players of countries would be then Japan and China. When it comes to crowdsourcing in China, if we consider all those stats and data that I threw at you, we can say that the environment of crowdsourcing is extremely beneficial, especially considering the fact that the Chinese are generally perhaps a more collective people than we are in the West, where it's more individual-based. So it's natural to be part of communities and collaborate on projects. Obviously, the massive internet user base is a good starting point, considering that a lot of the crowdsourcing happens or is facilitated through the internet. On the right, you can see the two biggest crowdsourcing sites and the number of users, in million users. So they would be bigger than the equivalents in the West, respectively, if we look at the two biggest sites. And only the users on those two sites make out more than 10 million online workers last year. A few examples of crowdsourcing projects in China when it comes to translation. So the British magazine Economist is crowd-translated by volunteers and published bi-weekly. So they translate each edition, but it's published every 2 weeks. There are also a lot of Western TV shows like Prison Breaks translated by groups of translators, and that's very much passion-driven, like Antoine mentioned, when it comes to motivating people to be part of community translation crowdsourcing projects. There's also a pretty strong sense of competition here, where these small groups of translators compete with each other, and in order to bring these TV shows out as quickly as possible. So they're often published in Chinese within 8 hours of being aired in the US. And then we want to show you a few services coming out of China in this area. The first one is a platform called HiTrans that HiSoft developed together with a third-party provider called Crowdin. So it's a community and crowd translation platform offering agile localization using either professional translators or volunteers in a community setting. Quick run through the features. We have a collaborative online editor where the content is translated, proofread, and approved. The editor is completely browser-based. It's really easy to sign up and get started. Just go to the browser and translate when you have some time to do that. So the simplicity is an important factor for success here. There are also integrated translation memory and glossaries, so you can upload your TMX and your TDX files. And we have an integrated machine translation component as well. We have features for reporting, quality control, where the project owner can track translation progress on an overall project level, but also on an individual translator level. And there are features to check quality and cost on an individual level, on an overall level as well, using votes and using the approval rates for the individual translators. Automation is an important part of this, for the agile aspect of it. So the workflow is more or less completely automated in terms of handoffs and handbacks. Of course, the machine translation is automated. Part of the communication is automated as well, with notifications sent out. If someone would have a comment for a string, there would be a notification to the reviewer or a project owner. And this frees up PM time for more qualified tasks for the tracking and quality control, rather than handling files back and forth. And a very important aspect for the community part, or for engaging the users, would be the user interaction, of course. So we've got a couple of different project roles: translator, proofreader, approver, or QA resource, the project owner, and the client role, and they have access to different parts of the system. All users can vote, and of course all users can submit translations as well, so we might have multiple translations for a single string, and then there would be voting as a help for the project owner or the approver to select the best translation. Of course they can overrule the voting as well, but it's a good measure at least of which translation might be the best in each case. As part of incentivizing the translators, we use the translators ranking, and that would be based on number of translations submitted, but also on the voting patterns, on the number of the translations approved. And we can track the translator activity over time, so you can see how the translator is contributing over time. For the communication part, we have discussion boards for each project, but also on a language basis to discuss translation issues and terminology, things like that. And as I said, there are comments. You can add comments on the source content or the target translations, and there will be email notifications sent out. On the right hand here, you can see the view that the project owner would get if they click the translator, so you can see what they have contributed in different categories. You can promote them to a different role or demote them if necessary. You can activate the project access or deactivate that, and if necessary remove all contributions by that person. And there's a rating from 1 to 10 for each translator based on quality and number of submissions and so forth. I don't know if you can see my rating there, probably for the battery if you can. And that's it for HiTrans, so Anne is going to tell you a bit about VanSinfo.
Hi everyone, my name is Anne and I work at VanSinfo. I'd like to just briefly explain you one system that we have in place. It's called the speech crowdsourcing system that we currently use for our transcription services, which we do in just over 20 languages. A small comment on the term crowdsourcing. This system that we have in place, it's not exactly crowdsourcing in its purest form, like the crowdsourcing that has been explained in the previous presentations. We call upon actually the support of controlled crowds, which are basically a crowd that consists of small groups of crowds per country or region. So you can call it more like a community. And another difference is that we do pay these resources. So it's not the purest form of crowdsourcing, but it is based on the efforts of a community. So we mainly use it for the transcription services, and up until recently, the transcription services were done based basically in the premises of our office in Beijing. So we asked all of the natives to come to our office in order to make the transcription. And we realized that actually there's very, well, the way we set up the workflow, the native speakers were not they didn't need to know a lot of technical knowledge. So basically we realized that this transcription could be done just in their home or in their native country. So that's why we've created this system where we actually call upon a community of native speakers in their region or native country. Let's have a look. And it has a number of benefits. First of all, because the system is cloud-based, we can send out basically the work to native speakers in the communities in their own native country. So they can work from home anywhere, basically, provided they have internet connection. They don't have to download anything on their computer because the transcription and annotation tools are installed on our cloud server. And it also reduces the risk of losing half-completed tasks because there were some issues with the system or network interruptions. In order to manage the resources that we put on these transcription services, we're using an online resource management platform that was developed internally by us. Well, this highlights again the difference in the pure form crowdsourcing, because we know exactly who's working on what. And the features or first of all, it's not a cloud server-based system. This is only used by the project managers in our office. We use it to create tasks and submit resource requests for multiple languages simultaneously. At all times, we can keep track of the individual resource allocation. We can also see how many work hours each resource has executed per task. And besides the task allocation, we also use it to keep track of online trainings, because we give a lot of online trainings to these community members. Okay, that's about it. Do you have any questions?